Breaking news! The Miami Dolphins are making some serious moves in free agency, and we just got a big salary cap update that could change the course of their strategy. Let's break down the major signings, the cap situation, and what Chris Grier might be planning next. Before you go any further, make sure you've hit the like button, but only do so if you've been a Miami Dolphins fan for over 20 years. It's great to see fans of all ages here. Some were there for the first game. You're Miami's treasure. If possible, write this: the Miami Dolphins are in my heart. So without further ado, let's get to the news. So far, Miami has made 10 major signings, addressing several needs across the roster. The first move was to bring back practice squad defensive lineman Matt Dickerson. But things really started to heat up when they signed Zach Wilson to a one-year deal worth up to $10 million, with $6 million guaranteed. The move caught some people off guard, but it makes sense when you consider that Miami wanted an experienced backup to Tua Tagovailoa, especially with how last season ended. Wilson, while inconsistent in his time with the Jets, has shown flashes of talent. Perhaps a fresh start in Miami under Mike McDaniel's offensive system could be just what he needs to unlock his potential. But the biggest move so far? That would have to be landing offensive lineman James Daniels. Miami locked him in on a 3-year, $24 million deal, and he is expected to take over at right guard. This is a player the Dolphins have had their eyes on for a while. Daniels is an excellent zone run-blocking lineman, which makes him a perfect fit for Miami's scheme. He was the highest-graded offensive lineman in run blocking by PFF in the first 4 weeks of last season before suffering a torn Achilles. The good news? He's on track to be fully healthy for training camp. The even better news? The way his contract is structured is extremely favorable for Miami. The first year carries only a $3.4 million cap hit, allowing the Dolphins to make additional moves in free agency. And if for some reason things don't work out, they aren't tied to him long-term. The flexibility in this deal shows how well Miami is managing their cap situation. Another interesting addition is wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Ikine, signed on a 2-year, $6.5 million deal. He's a big-bodied receiver, 6 feet 2 inches, 210 pounds, who can be a red zone threat. Miami now has a very solid receiving core with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Westbrook-Ikine, and rookie Malik Washington. If Westbrook-Ikine can carve out a role as that third outside receiver, it will take some pressure off Hill and Waddle and give Miami a more diverse passing attack. On the defensive side, Miami brought in 2 safeties, Tyrell Dodson and Ashton Davis, on inexpensive 1-year deals. The signing of Ifeatu Melifonwu from the Detroit Lions is another under-the-radar move that could pay off. He's a versatile defensive back who played cornerback in college but transitioned to safety in the NFL. Over his 4-year career, he's only played around 874 snaps, essentially 1 full season of work, but his coverage stats are solid. He has a 60% completion rate allowed, 2 career interceptions, and a passer rating against him of just over 100. He's also a decent tackler, missing only 10 tackles in his career, better than Javon Holland's numbers from last season. Melifonwu's ability to line up at multiple positions makes him a valuable piece in Miami's secondary, and at just $2.5 million against the cap, it's a low-risk, high-upside move. Now, let's talk about the cap situation. After these signings, Miami's current cap space sits at about $10.9 million. That's not a lot of money, especially considering they still have some major holes to fill: cornerback, defensive line, and potentially another offensive guard. But the Dolphins have options. There are some contract restructures that could create up to $16 million in additional cap space. Players like Jordan Brooks, Zach Sealer, and Austin Jackson could all be candidates for restructures, which would give Miami more breathing room to make additional moves. And if Miami does free up more money, there are still some big names on the market. At left guard, veterans like Kevin Zeitler and Brandon Scherf could be short-term solutions on a 1-year, $5 million deal. That would allow Miami to draft a young interior lineman on day 2 and let them develop behind an experienced player. At cornerback, Asante Samuel Jr. and Rasul Douglas are 2 top options still available. If Miami wants to go the veteran route, Stephon Gilmore and Jonathan Jones are also possibilities. And if the Dolphins wait a few weeks, they could try to bring back Kendall Fuller on a cheap deal. He played well last season but dealt with injuries, which could make teams hesitant to sign him right away. But the biggest priority? Re-signing Calais Campbell. The 38-year-old was an anchor on Miami's defensive line last season and would provide much-needed stability alongside Zach Sealer. The Dolphins are reportedly waiting to see what Campbell wants to do, but if they can bring him back, it would be a huge win. There's also a chance Miami drafts a defensive lineman in the first 3 rounds, letting him learn from a veteran like Campbell before taking over a starting role. So, Dolphins fans, What do you think? Who has been your favorite signing so far? And what move should Miami make next? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The Miami Dolphins have made some smart, calculated moves in free agency so far, but the work isn't done yet. With just under $11 million in cap space left and some key positions still in need of reinforcement, Chris Grier and the front office have some important decisions to make in the coming days. Let's start with the cornerback situation. Right now, Jalen Ramsey is the only true lockdown boundary corner on the roster. Miami needs someone to play opposite him, especially with the way Vic Fangio's defense operates. One name that keeps coming up is Asante Samuel Jr. He's still available, and at just 24 years old, he could be a long-term solution. He's got great instincts, plays aggressively, and has already shown he can be a high-level starter in the NFL. The challenge? His market value. Miami would likely need to clear cap space to afford him, which could mean restructuring contracts or backloading a deal. If the Dolphins are looking for a more budget-friendly option, Rasul Douglas is a solid veteran who could step in right away. Another interesting possibility is bringing back Kendall Fuller on a veteran minimum deal. The Dolphins are already paying him $5 million in dead money this season, so why not try to get him back on the roster? He played well in the 11 games he was on the field last season, but dealt with concussions. If he's healthy and willing to return on a cheap contract, it makes a lot of sense. Now, let's talk defensive line. The Dolphins have a major problem here. Zach Sealer is literally the only defensive lineman currently under contract. That's a massive issue that needs to be addressed immediately. The top priority should be re-signing Calais Campbell. Yes, he's 38 years old, but he was an absolute rock on that defensive line last season. He brings leadership, experience, and production, all of which Miami desperately needs. If Campbell doesn't return, Miami will need to act fast. There are still some solid free agent options available, including Deshaun Hand, who could also be a candidate to re-sign. Levi Onwuzurike is another name that's been mentioned as a possible target, but right now, everything seems to hinge on what Campbell decides to do. If Miami can bring him back and pair him with a young draft pick, that would be an ideal scenario. Speaking of the draft, Miami currently has 11 picks. That's a lot of draft capital, and it gives them flexibility. They could use some of those picks to trade up and grab a top-tier prospect, or they could stay put and build depth across multiple positions. One area to watch is the offensive line. Miami's starting unit looks solid with Terron Armstead, Isaiah Wynn, Connor Williams, James Daniels, and Austin Jackson, but depth is always a concern. Injuries have plagued this unit in recent years, so drafting a young lineman on day 2 or day 3 makes a lot of sense. Another potential draft target? Safety. The Dolphins signed Ifeatu Melifonwu and Ashton Davis, but neither is a guaranteed long-term solution. Miami could look to add a young safety early in the draft to pair with Javon Holland. With so many talented defensive backs available in this year's class, don't be surprised if Miami grabs one in the first few rounds.